Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, and Britney Spears are among Time's 100 most influential people of 2021. So the key to being an influential person is just have a big public fight with your family.
Consumers are expected to spend up to 9% more this holiday season compared to 2020, specifically on sprays that keep your face mask from smelling like a rotting corpse.
In Australia, a car driving erratically blinded other motorists by releasing blue smoke for a gender reveal party. In related news, the world is now experiencing a second pandemic of people killed by gender reveal parties.
True. Nicki Minaj announced she's anti-vaccine, and ever since then, the vaccine has been in the studio working on a diss track.
And finally, here in California, Governor Gavin Newsom was victorious in preventing an attempt to have him recalled and removed from office, which just proves if you're going to try to oust someone, regardless of their public image, you really want to put a viable alternative out there, someone who inspires people, someone who makes sense, someone who engenders confidence in an ability to leave, someone whose radio station is higher than a 1 share, because remember, in California, it all comes down to show business. Welcome to Biden time. Coming in at the right moment, turning it into Scott Moore time is, of course, Scott Moore, missing out on all the mirth shared by both myself and Tamara. It's great to have the band back together. Wonderful to see everyone. Let's dive in and start talking about the results to the recall election here in California. Let's start with you, Tamara. Just I assume you had to vote. Did you vote in person or did you vote before you left?
No, I voted. Gosh, it feels like weeks ago now. So I voted with a mail. I voted the day that my ballot came, and I put it in the mail. I do normally like to go to in-person voting just for the holiday of it, but no, I just put mine in the mail because at that point, I guess it was so long ago that at that point, that's when polls were showing that it was sort of neck and neck, and so I felt the need to like get my vote in early so that we could get some better numbers on polling. And because by the time voting was taking place in person, I think everybody was just like, oh, I mean, no way Elder's going to win this one. So yes, nice to see that Newsom defeated the recall. Enough people came out to represent this heavily blue state of ours, and it was just a massive waste of taxpayer money. Hey,
yeah,
the American way.
I think that that is the biggest takeaway because it was unsuccessful. Had the recall been successful, then then there's something to be said for it. But it was an awful lot of money spent for. I think the numbers that I saw was as of this morning, more than half of overall ballots just flat out voted no. And then you can break it down beyond that. And of the ones who did vote yes, I guess Elder had 46% of those.
I saw that his percentage of the votes was pretty high. And then I thought because the majority of the ballots didn't mark anybody. I, of course, marked Angeline. I want to check what her percentage was. My guess right now,
it's maybe less than.
Don't tell me.
Okay.
Is she right behind Larry Elder?
Let's just say a little bit behind.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that, and I'll let you look it up. And I don't want to provide spoilers. Now, Scott, you're away working. That's why we can see that handsome artwork behind you.
Yes.
So you had to vote by mail, correct?
I did what Tamara did, and like Tamara, I usually like to go in person as well because there's something about the tradition and also the comfort level of feeling like the vote's going to count. Regardless, you always feel a little more nervous when you send it off into the ether that it's going to make it. But I was also traveling as well, so I went ahead and did early for the first time. And again, to everyone's point, it was a waste of money, and I would still say it was a waste of money, even if Gavin Newsom was recalled, because we have an election in 14 months. So it was a waste of money to begin with, and we all know the reason that it was done was it was a ploy by the GOP to try to get a Republican in office during an off year because they know they couldn't win during the general. But my surprise was. Like Tamara was saying, how close it was looking in the polls to see what an essential landslide it was to not recall Gavin Newsom. And in fact, his numbers were virtually the same from his landslide win in 2018. So I think that was the biggest takeaway to me, was the surprise of just how heavily the amount was to not recall him by an essential landslide. I thought it was going to be a lot closer because it was an off election year. And I think also Larry Elder's numbers higher than I anticipated as well, as the replacement candidate if the recall did pass. Because like Tam was saying, it was in the mid 40s, and you're looking at some of the numbers before, and it was like in the 20s. So I was surprised by both of those takeaways, just the actual sheer landslide, no vote winning to retain Governor Newsom, but also how high Larry Elder's numbers were, which is a bit of a surprise as well. Just how they kind of consolidated around him as compared to some of the other 46 candidates that were there, 45 candidates that were out there. So
yes. There were 45 other candidates. Yes. So I'm the only one who voted in person, and you get those texts, in the days leading up that are like, "Hey, don't forget to vote. Did you send it back yet?" I'm like, "No, I'm going. It's okay." And they go, "Oh, we'll remind you tomorrow." I'm like, "I already know. I'm going. It's okay." It's like, I get it. That's, you're a volunteer. That's what you're supposed to do. But I'm going. And I got a sticker, and then I left it upstairs. I was gonna put it back on this shirt for the show, and then I've left my prop upstairs. So did it really happen if I'm not wearing the sticker a day later? That's
right.
The real question. But yeah, I think that in hindsight, I guess it's not surprising when you consider this state, just how blue the state of California is. I mean, it's you'll every once in a while you'll see something, and I don't know, I still feel like Schwarzenegger had a little bit to do with what he was saying, but then there a lot of that was wouldn't it be funny to vote for the Terminator? Like, we totally have to do this. Let's see what happens, But in terms of the message, I think Schwarzenegger did have a more cohesive message, and yes, he had broader appeal than Larry Elder. And I have it at the top of the show as a joke, but I mean, it's not like Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity were running for governor. It's a guy who I think a lot of people don't even know who he is.
I'd never heard of him before this election.
Yeah,
and he was on the ballot for the previous gubernatorial race.
Yeah, and so I think that if you are going to choose someone whose strength is their star power, well, boy, they should be a star. I mean,
this actually was just a publicity stunt for Larry Elder, because now the state who had never heard of all these people who have never heard of him now have heard of him. So it is a boost to his celebrity. It's just a big Larry Elder publicity stunt.
Yeah.
It cost
so
the state $250,000.
So the way that the results are listed has to be a bit of a gut punch because it says number one. These are earlier today, so the numbers are different, but this is just to illustrate the point. Number one, it says no one, 44%, 44.7%. Number two, Larry Elder, 26%. So overall, it is the 20% number. It's of the ballots, it's like 40 something, and then Kevin Paffrath, 5%. Kevin Falconer, 4.8%. I didn't realize we were this close to having it, be a dead heat between two Kevins. That's
there are more Kevins? I thought there was more than
I think
two.
there might be, but
there's three, I think, right?
And so I don't know where Angeline came in, Tamara, but it is clearly under 4.8%. Despite the advice of Drexel and Scott, I felt like I needed to put somebody on there. So I did actually, you convinced me for Angeline, but also our friend Storage Yard resident pointed out to me that she's against daylight savings time. And I'm like, I don't need anything else. That's literally all I needed. That can be my single issue, because look, I understand why they wanted it to be left blank. And we talked about it on this show, and then it's just like, yeah, but there's this idea of what if there's not quite enough blanks?
Exactly. Well, the Democrats were split, I feel like, on whether or not to mark somebody or not, because I felt like just to take a vote away from Larry Elder is worthwhile should the recall go through. So,
yeah. So, and look, we won't spend the whole show on this, but I think it's relevant to look at things in the context of the rest of the country. But, I think that I don't know that Gavin Newsom should see this as a referendum on his popularity. I think that clearly this was a success. I'm not trying to take away from that, but I think that this is someone who has rightly been under criticism. And yes, there's individual incidents, and like, no, I don't think someone's opinion on him needs to be determined by not having the intelligence to realize that somebody would take a picture of you eating at the French Laundry when restaurants were supposed to be closed. But I don't think a single thing like that necessarily defines it. But you have a few things like that people are like, yeah, I don't know how much I like that guy.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I keep interrupting you a lot today.
That's
sorry.
All right. You've been around the world since the last time we had you on.
I do keep getting frustrated every time I hear people criticizing him for the French Laundry thing, because of the fact that there are legitimate reasons to criticize him. He changed he has wavered back and forth on homelessness. Just before the election, when the polls were more 50-50, he was shown to be like present at the sweeps of some homeless camps and things like that, and his allowing offshore drilling and then dismissing permits. But I mean, there are legitimate reasons to dislike Gavin Newsom, and the French Laundry thing is just stupid, tabloid fodder almost to me. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that like nobody's flying a Gavin Newsom flag outside their house. It's just, clearly in this situation.
Just staying the course, and I think that's why you get the impression, Scott, that Republicans, they were also split. I think that a lot of them realized that this isn't going to work. Let's see if we can build something, for 2022 and see if we can put somebody that's a viable crossover candidate with, centrist appeal, not Larry Elder, and I think that unless I'm mistaken, there was not specific endorsements, sort of like the party wasn't telling you how to vote. It was just more make sure you get out and vote. And remember, you don't like Gavin Newsom because of what he did to Tin Horn Flats. Remember, that's why we don't like him. And it's not really him. But anyway, but sort of, these sort of like buzzwords about, mask mandates and vaccine passports and a lot of the stuff we talk about here, that it was just like, yeah, vote against this guy. But I've never got the feeling that the party, even the state party, was that invested in this. I think any focus would really be on trying to beat him in a proper election next year. Right, Scott?
Yes and no. I think, obviously the people that were putting this recall and supporting it were, affiliated with the Republican Party and thought this was their opportunity to do it, was during this off year originally. And the reason why they didn't want to go for a particular candidate was their concern of alienating the people, again, that kind of Trumpian base that was going to go vote for Larry Elder. They didn't want to alienate that base by saying they were going to go, like, say, a more moderate candidate like Kevin Faulconer, for instance, who was sort of the vanilla candidate, if you would, that was more of the moderate Republican California kind of look of the past that had been successful statewide here. So I think that's why they didn't want to get too invested into it because of that. But either way, it failed. And I think what you saw was also, like you said, it wasn't because everyone loves Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom was able to pivot it and say, look, if you were to replace me with someone, this is who you're going to end up with, was a Trumpian type person like Larry Elder. And that's the exact wrong person that you want for California. And so more of the no vote was like, no, we don't want Larry Elder. Not so much, no, yes, we want to keep Gavin Newsom. Yes, people are, it is a Democratic state and people are going to vote for him. But you're right. It wasn't a love for Gavin Newsom as much of a fear that we'd end up with a Trumpian type candidate that would become governor in California for the next year. And that is what I think lured a lot of Democrats to get off the couch and go out and vote. And and also Trump still has that appeal to Democrats to get out and vote against anything Trump or Trump related. And you can see that still has a lot of power to motivate Democrats even now. So when you had that, that's really what turned the corner for a lot of ways for Gavin Newsom, was the fact that he framed it more as let's not have a Trump type candidate back in office here. And I'm better than having that type of alternative. And I mean, I hate to say it, but there's no way that a Republican is going to be able to win a general election next year. I mean, even it's just, if they could not win and they lost by a landslide in a recall election, there's no way that they're going to be able to get a viable candidate that's going to appeal to the mainstream California voter this time next year to vote and boot Gavin Newsom from office. So this made him stronger, which was the
right.
point
Well,
along.
yeah, I can see a few things about that. The first is, a year's time is better than the amount of time there was for this recall and the resources. But that candidate that you put up in 2022 is also probably somebody that you should be prepared to run again the next time. You know what I mean? It's like you're going to build them up, but it's more because this is your person for the future.
Right.
Because look, I do think California is a state that could elect another Republican governor,
Of course.
but I do think that this is not the moment. I think you're right about that because of where that party is. And
it's not that kind of person either. It's not
Yeah.
going to be a Larry Elder that's going to win a California. It would be more of a Kevin Faulconer type modern
Yeah.
Republican.
Because people
Right.
think of California, I mean, yes, it's a very, very blue state, so it's easy for somebody to think that that means we're a very, very left state, but we're not. Because as far as what measures get passed on every ballot, even though Democrats are elected, the blue voters are pretty moderate as far as if you're going by like what types of measures get passed. It's never anything that really benefits workers' rights. It's never any policies that are very left leaning that ever get far through. So though California is a blue state, it's a moderately blue state. So that's it's not unlikely that a moderate Republican could get in office.
Yeah, no, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, it's there are, of course, your exceptions to sort of the idea of just how blue the state is. Of course, in those pockets. I mean, there are a lot of people who live in Orange County. I mean, picking them out, but there's also you have a lot of rural counties up north. But I think that
well, I mean, those are the red pockets, but I guess what I'm saying is of the blue pockets, they're further to the center than they are to the left.
They're exactly. No, I do agree. Yeah. And those measures, those propositions that we get to vote on, that are always so confusing. You're right, though. Those are hardly, progressive with a capital P policies that are getting put out there. But in terms of what Scott was saying earlier, in terms of this was a no vote. This isn't like a we love Gavin Newsom vote. This is a we can't have this alternative, which, I mean, that's the Biden vote. That's the Trump vote in 2016 as well. It's like, there's this other thing that you can get. So do you want to vote for the not that? And I think that, there's one of those things we heard a lot last year. It's like, Biden can't go out there and just be like, I'm not Trump. But why did he win? Because he went out there and said, I'm not Trump. Yes, I'm not saying that there wasn't anything else to it, but ultimately that's really what it was. It was there were only two real choices on your ballot, as with this California recall election, and you either liked it or you didn't. And then just another thing that Sam said in the chat was that the French Laundry wasn't tabloid fodder. It's a substantial complaint, but what Tamara was getting at is that there are such more. I use the word substantial in the wrong statement because there are things that are much more substantial, like legitimate complaints that people have, that Democrats have about him. So yes, that is something that it shows the hypocrisy of what he's trying to instill. Like, these are rules for the rest of you, not for me. But the other things are much bigger, and homelessness and the offshore drilling. And those are very important things right there. But the other point I wanted to bring up from Sam was that sadly, the California Republicans weren't involved in this, but I think it's because they knew that it wasn't really a winning proposition, So I think that's why they didn't get involved. So let's see. And you have the Scrimshaw. Isn't there a lower limit on election money in a normal gubernatorial election? I don't know. Are there limits? I didn't think there was, but maybe I'm wrong. Does anybody know if that's accurate?
Scott?
Limits to what?
Sort of like spending, like election finance stuff. I don't think there are spending limits in regular elections. Not in this state anyway.
No, because Governor Newsom had $75 million or something crazy on hand to that was part of the thing too. He had so much money. And yes, I
running
will say
ads during Dodger games.
Yeah.
I know. I would say they're correct that the official Republican Party would say they weren't involved with this, but we know that it was Republicans and in general that were the ones that got the recall started, is what I'm saying. So maybe the party was trying to keep their distance from being official because they knew it would likely lose, but it was Republicans that were involved in initializing this recall to begin with.
Yeah. And Sam just throws in, I'm surprised that people are surprised that people voted no. Yeah, I don't think anybody who is surprised. There are people that live in other states that were shocked by the way that this went. And it's like, look, it's that when you look at it in the context of this state, I mean, I think that, Ron DeSantis getting reelected next year, people outside of Florida will be shocked. But people who live in Florida will probably be like, man, it ain't that much of a shock.
I think it was more of the surprise by the amount.
Yes, I agree with
landslide, that. And that's where the surprise is, because I would have thought maybe it was going to be in the mid 50s, maybe it was a 55, 45 type thing. But to see it well over 64%, I think that's where the surprise came from, that the numbers were as high as they were.
And I do think that is due to the early polling, because the early, like we keep mentioning, the early polls were shown at 50-50, and I think that is some think that's because one of the, like a poll that came out of Berkeley, that's the one that's largely cited. Apparently the wording of it was a little confusing, so they think it was kind of a misleading. But I think people seeing those early poll numbers was so close that encouraged a lot of people who probably wouldn't have come out for just a recall election to turn out.
Yeah, well, let's sort of pull back and look at this in a bigger picture. So I don't know that necessarily the takeaway needs to be that, like, we'll see these, these Trumpist ideals, these Trumpian candidates, which, by the way, Sam also pointed out that Larry Elder is considered to be pretty milquetoast by a lot of Trumpian types. So, he doesn't go far enough. He hasn't
mentioned the Hollywood pedophile ring. So, yes, he's a little bit more tempered down.
Yeah, that's true. He didn't do a week on Pizzagate. You're right. Mm-hmm. But to the sort of the overall point, this idea of like, well, I think that it's certainly worth taking notice, but I think California is a very specific bubble. I don't know that you can look at it and have it in the context of, oh, this is going to clearly be a good indication for the midterms. And somebody that both Scott and I will reference regularly, Dr. Larry Sabato at the University of Virginia, mentions that, somebody asked him exactly that question this morning, and he's like, it's a year away, and you can't look that far ahead with something like this. There's a lot that can change. Mm-hmm. So what are mistakes that you think could be made, Tamara, by looking at these results? So in other parts of the country, they're like, well, this is clearly going to work. Or does the not Trump types, is that message going to work, you think, a year from now? Or should people be more careful when they're crafting their plans? And by people, I guess specifically, I mean Democrats.
Well, yeah. I mean, the 20% of voters in this election still voted for Larry Elder, who is who aligns himself with Trump, who is endorsed by Trump, who has most, I think, all of the things that were touted by Trump. So 20%, that's a lot of voter turnout still supported this guy. So, I can see why people who are in these deep red states who are Trump supporters, I can see how they think that elections are fraudulent when they're only surrounded by these numbers. It's like, as a whole, the Trump base is very small, but it's mighty. It's small, but it's mighty. So I don't think Democrats have to worry about this Trump base. I think it's the Republican Party that has to figure out how to navigate themselves in order to sustain themselves, because the Republican Party is divided between the Trumpisms and then the traditionally fiscal Republicans, fiscal conservatives, the traditional Republican, and even though we say traditional Republicans, the ones that are becoming more, socially, the ones more accepting of things like pro-choice and LGBT rights and things like that. So I think it's the Republican Party that needs to examine the path that they need to take as far as Trump voters, because they're the ones that have to, in order to sustain themselves, they're going to have to figure out, like, it's not helping them to cater to the Trump base. And the fact that Biden was elected, the fact that, other things are showing that the Republicans need to not lean so heavily on their Trump base. So I think it's the Republicans, not the Democrats, that need to figure out how to navigate around the Trumpians.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point, because I think what it comes down to is the idea that the Trump base is not bigger than the amount of moderates you need to pull in as a moderate Republican. I think that the Trump base, still very large, is smaller than it was. And it will just depend on sort of the state by state approach to it. And I think that just the hypothetical that if Republicans are not able to get a lot of gains next year and they don't take over the House, it'll be because they did not adequately reconcile this idea of what to do about Trump. Do we try and do something else? Do we just embrace that? Do we go all in? What do you think about all this, Scott?
Well, and again, to Tamara's point, and I've said this time and time again, and I was saying this to people too about the recall thing. It does come down to continuing to go after that Trump base is not a long-term winning strategy. And we've said this so many times, and we are proven right again by seeing the results here in California. Granted, we know Trump is wildly unpopular here and would, but again, if you're going to put candidates up in a recall election, even like most places said, you're not going to be able to get any kind of Democrats to go out and go along with this when you're going to have people that are more extreme and supporting Trump. I think that's a lot of reasons why even Kevin Faulconer, which I don't know why, he kept telling people he voted for Trump in 2020. You're not going to win in a state like California if you're going to do that. And it's not a winning strategy. Trump didn't really win in 2016 by the popular vote. He was not popular ever. He didn't, he pulled down his party in 2018 and 2020, and he lost. And by continuing to cater to this base, as rabid as they are and as, involved as they are, there are not enough of them to be able to cobble together a winning coalition in the long run. And the sooner that Republicans can dump him, the better they will be. And to Tamara's point, it's not a Democrat thing. It's the Republicans that need to figure out how they want to go forward and what kind of party they want to be. Are they going to be a party that's just going to restrict voting rights for people to be able to narrowly squeak out wins in places and continue to cater to conspiracy theorists and this Trump base? Or are they going to try to broaden their appeal to an expanding and growing diverse population and hopefully be a little bit more moderate and go back to appealing like the California moderate Republicans were of the past 20 years plus? This was the world that Nixon and, came from, and Reagan came from. This is the California that made a lot of the Republicans that were successful in the middle 20th century that are, now basically the Republican Party is becoming extinct in California. And I've said this again time and time as well. You only have to look to California to see the future of the National Republican Party. If they don't change, they will become just a very regional, southern, rural, Intermountain West party, and that is it. They will continue to lose to the bigger states with the bigger populations, including Texas and eventually Florida and North Carolina and Arizona and Georgia, and they will just be a small regional party if they don't expand their diversity and what they're going to be. If they want to continue to double down on this Trumpian base, that's their future. And that's what they can look at to California and see exactly where.
In that scenario, do you see there being the emergence of an additional party, or is this sort of like, or does the Democratic Party become like Disney, where they buy up Marvel, they buy up Star Wars, they buy up Fox, they buy up National Geographic? All of a sudden, it's just like, well, there's only really one party to vote for now. What do you think, Scott? Do you think that that's what would happen? Is that there would just be a larger party and a smaller party, or would we also get, I mean, yes, there are plenty of other parties out there, but would one of them or more possibly gain prominence if that was to be what happened?
I mean, stranger things have happened, and we've seen this where, there was a one party and the Democrats that are now more of the Republican one party in the South, it was one party rule in the South for many years with one party, and you could see that happening. And we just look, even though we have the quirky electoral college, when you look back to the past generation, Democrats have won the presidential race, 7 out of 8 times. I mean, so they already have an edge right now, and they're only going to get bigger. So like you said, the point is the Republicans will eventually have to figure out how their future is going to look to appeal to a wider group of people. Otherwise, you're right. It's going to be more of the Democrats that are going to be the progressive wing and over to the conservative wing, because Democrats have also become a bit more to the right over the past year. We're starting to see the shift back to the left of the progressive wing and take a little more ownership. But for the last generation, starting with Bill Clinton, in order for the Democrats to come out of the wilderness to win at the national level again, they tacked to the right and they became more of a moderate party. And it was liberal was a scary word, and Democrats could be liberals in the 90s and the early 2000s. But now we're starting to see it shift back. So I think it will kind of have a shift back, but it will broaden its appeal until Republicans they're going to take that vacuum from Republicans until they can not be so far to the right and extreme and be able to come back a bit to the center as well.
2 more points on this. First, a question from you, Vila Scrimshaw. I heard that the yes-no vote percentage flipped in the last 2 weeks. Is that the case? We did not already discuss that, and I had not heard that. And if that is anything, I mean, that's just polling. So polling, as we've seen the last few years, can be very subjective. But I had not. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tamara.
Oh, I thought he was referring to the fact that they were 50-50 and then Newsom defeated the recall by such a landslide. I thought that's what he was referring to, which we did talk about. But
right, but I thought that the focus was on it being like only over a short amount of time. I think by the time that we got to now, I don't think people were as nervous. But again, I think that when you're relying on polls that are taken the old-fashioned way, at least at this moment in time, that I don't know if it's necessarily the if you can rely on it in the same way. But so I mean, we essentially did talk about that. So I'm just sort of wondering what what each of you think, and then we'll spend the last few minutes on a couple other things. But this idea that today, and this is and Yuvia Scrimshaw does answer, that's what I meant. It tightened in the last 2 weeks after being against Newsom before. I think that it's over more than 2 weeks, but yeah, I think you're right. The impression was that it was really close. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the money came into play that we were talking about earlier. The fact that Democrats did spend as much as they did. And, the big thing here is that yesterday they were planting some seeds about fraud in the recall election. And, there was a statement that apparently went up early from Larry Elder that was supposed to, I think, go up this morning. The idea of, the rampant fraud. Former President Trump posted about it. But then I think when the margins were what they were, I haven't heard about it. It wasn't close enough to even pretend that it was stolen is the way that I feel. So I thought because that's clearly what the playbook is going forward. And I'm not saying that no Democratic candidate will try that at some point, but I think that that's what they were expecting to do here. And then ultimately they were just like, we can't do that. But, and again, it's specifically here in Los Angeles County, but this morning, the news came that sort of mirroring some things that are happening in the Bay Area and in New York is that you'll need to be fully vaccinated to go to bars, nightclubs, and wineries, and also if you work there. So it's not as sweeping as restaurants and movie theaters and things as it is in other places. But this always, this set off some conspiracy theory alarms of, the day after the recall we have this, but it's on the county level. So I think that this was going to happen anyway, is my point.
Okay.
And they're taking the baby steps of like, well, what about just places where people get drunk? Can we try that? And the, sort of trying to put those in place. But I'll just ask you both, because we do talk a lot about some of these vaccine mandates and passports and stuff. Tamara, do you think we are heading on a path where it will be, you need to be vaccinated to go to restaurants and to go to movie theaters and go to, a lot of the stuff that we've seen in New York, of course, being the biggest city in the country, and they're the ones that have that in place.
Is California headed there?
Do you expect that? I mean, let's keep it at Los Angeles County for right now, because the state as a whole, obviously, it's a little trickier. But do you think that this step of wineries and nightclubs and bars is just the first step of a full vax requirement for places like that?
Yes, I think that it is a possibility for Los Angeles County, because this is a county where, our vaccine rate is pretty high, not as high as San Francisco, but it is pretty high, and that is something that could happen in Los Angeles County, and I think that the vaccine requirements are needed for the sake of keeping a business safe. We say, how it shouldn't be left to somebody who's a waiter or somebody who's working at CVS to have to enforce, rules that gets pushback that they shouldn't have to deal with. So for the sake of, protecting workers, for the sake of, protecting a business from lawsuits that could stem from, people getting sick should an outbreak occur and things like that. Like it only makes sense from like a legal standpoint for us to have these vaccine passports go into place. I think that is a possibility. I'm not saying it's 100% going to happen, but I think it's a possibility that it could. And I'm still on the fence. I've said before that, like, as far as vaccine mandates, when it comes to like employment, I've said before how, like, I understand the reasoning behind it, why it's important to protect a business in order to have those in place. But my only hesitation is just that when people who are already distrustful of science, distrustful of the media, distrustful of the government, and now their job is forcing this mandate on them, it's only going to make them buck up even more. Like, it's just not helping. It's not helping the person who is vaccine hesitant. So that is my hesitation with any sort of vaccine requirement. And so obviously pro-vaccine, and I feel that it's important for the sake of workers and business owners to have a vaccine requirement, but it just makes me worried about, how can we, if we're trying to get through to people who are vaccine hesitant and get them to actually acknowledge that this is saving lives, a mandate is not going to make them do that. It's only going to make them dig their heels in even further.
Yeah, Scott, just quickly, your thoughts. If you think that that's where we're headed, and if it is, do you see it beyond counties like Los Angeles County and Marin County and some of your bluest counties here in the state?
100% agree. That's the direction we're headed in, and I think part of that is you're going to have support from the federal level here. When you saw that the Biden administration is requiring anyone over 100 employees, companies to now have people fully vaccinated, which includes all the biggest companies that have, so far some of them have neglected to do it, not necessarily as an anti-vax thing, but not to force employees to get vaccinated. But like, for instance, the company I work with is basically saying, if you're not vaccinated, because I hire a lot of field people they can't work with us. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely the directions to go in, especially in the larger counties. I think probably at some point the state will, regardless of what you want to say about Gavin Newsom winning the recall election handily. I think that it'll eventually be a state thing, because you will have some of these small rural counties that would probably not require that, but I think it will come down to the state, and you can have any of the conspiracy theories you want of the recall happening, but this would likely been the direction, unless obviously a Republican had won, that the state will now enforce these rules too, because it's the only way that we're going to get out of this pandemic. And yes, it's always going to be around like the flu to some degree, but the only way to get it to a manageable level is to now implement these things, because we've given the time for folks to get the vaccine, and the ones that are not going to do it, now we're going to have to step it up and say you're going to have to if you want to go out and have a somewhat of a semblance of normalcy now. That's your true way of having freedom, is by getting these vaccines. So yes, 100%. I think that's in the direction we're going in.
Well, yeah, I think that it seems very likely that you'll see these sort of things become more widespread, and places like California seem to be the most likely places for them to happen. In our last few minutes, I wanted to talk about something completely different, and sort of get both of your thoughts on this idea that we learned from, I guess, this Bob Woodward book, that General Miley, while he was still serving under President Trump, called a Chinese general on multiple occasions, I believe it's twice, and said that the U.S. won't strike, spoke about Trump's rhetoric and about the U.S. and promising to give a heads up. And I think that, if you're the Biden administration and you hear that, it's like, well, yeah, Trump was pretty crazy. But should there be concerns if this is true, and you hold a hearing and you find out exactly what the circumstances are? Is this someone? I'll ask you first, Scott. Is this someone that you should be concerned about? Like, well, what if in the future our interests don't align? Is this someone that we shouldn't trust because they have a history of undermining their commander in chief? What do you think? And my brother already jumped in and said he should be given a medal and then court-martialed. So, yes, I think there you go. There's the 1-2 punch there. But in terms of a more tangible, realistic action to take place, Scott, what do you think about General Miley's comments, and what the way that the current administration should view him?
Well, we've had this discussion too with the Woodward book and how he did it in the past. Holding a lot of very important information until his book was released. And it's kind of like, it goes back to that again as well. It's like, here are people with really important knowledge of situations that were occurring, and they all kind of kept it to themselves, which I get to some degree, especially right out, you wait until Trump's term was exhausted anyways, but you think to some degree, if this was the case of the level of the threat or the concern that you had, clearly you're not going to say it publicly because that's not for public consumption. But however, it just feels like there were a lot of things that should have happened that didn't, that we still allow this man, Trump, to, be able to run around and have this kind of this power. Although we know he was upset that it was constrained as it was. The fact that it was all happening, and to some degree, there wasn't more of an opportunity to get that out to whoever it would be, if it was Mike Pence, if it was somebody else that was high up in the administration, to be alerted. And then you have Bob Woodward again holding on to this knowledge and then not saying anything until the book was released. So, there's definitely those things. They're not saying you can't trust him, because I don't know if you could say that, because clearly he did have concerns, and he did, try to acquiesce and hold back from allowing Trump to have this full throttled power. So I don't think that's the case. That it just goes back to the fact that we had all this stuff going on that, wasn't maybe handled in the right way.
And Tamara, what do you think about the behavior, the alleged behavior by General Miley, and what President Biden should be considering at this point?
Well, Biden tends to do what polls show that the Americans care about. So I don't see him taking any big action on this, because I feel like this is something that's sort of buried in for the general public, what they're focused on right now. So I don't see Biden focusing on it too much. It does remind me of like John Bolton's book, and every single politician who has done this thing of where they so hold on to information to sell their book later on. And I think that's deplorable. I mean, I wish there was more whistleblowing and transparency in government when things are actually happening. But I don't I don't see any action taken on this, just because, like I said, if Biden doesn't see that that the American public is really fired up about it, I don't see him acting on it.
Yeah, and when these things happen, it always just makes me feel like I wish I knew anything of value and I could save it until my book was coming out, but I just don't know anything. But yeah, I think you're right that this doesn't seem to be a big ticket item other than just giving something for the former president to rattle cages about. They had to move on from the California recall election being stolen, so this seems to be today's talking point. I wanted to address something from earlier in the chat, just a programming note, as they say. Storage Yard resident, our pal, does say, it would be nice to know when this podcast starts. I tuned in at 11 a.m. and saw a Marvel comic book show. It was a Marvel movie show. Thank you very much, Storage Yard resident. But yes, that show does exist in the 11 a.m. Pacific time slot for the foreseeable future. And this show, we try to do at 9 a.m., but Scott is on the road. He's a working man. He works hard for the money, so we better treat him right. So we were able to make an adjustment for today. We will endeavor to be on at 9 a.m. Pacific time, but when we can not, I will try to do a better job of letting people know.
Was there a tweet about it? Because Storage Yard does a good job of following the Twitter updates.
No, I did not tweet it, but I didn't know that Storage Yard was on Twitter. I actually did not realize it. No, maybe he is. Storage Yard resident, if you're on Twitter, let us know what your account is. Yeah. And also, I was going to comment on this at the end. Sam Whitfield points out that Norm Macdonald, the comedian, passed away yesterday after a 10-year battle with cancer that no one knew about. I did not know him well, but I have a number of posts in terms of some of the material that I was a part of when I worked for the Dennis Miller Show. For a long time, he would call in every week. And I knew him a little bit, and he was every bit, well, actually, he's a little bit funnier off air than he could be on air. But, and it was very sad to hear that. And, there are those public figures who do suffer in silence, and they would just rather you not know, and then they just sort of quietly go away. But when you have an outpouring against, after something like this happens, I don't know about everyone else, but my timeline was just filled with clips, some of which I posted, but just from a lot of shows and stuff. So a truly unique voice. And I did find the irony in the official Saturday Night Live account posting a picture of him sitting at the Weekend Update desk talking about his passing, considering, of course, that he was fired from that job because he made too many OJ jokes. But water way under the bridge. But by the way, his joke the first Saturday after the OJ verdict was, well, apparently murder's illegal in the state of California now. I said it wrong. Apparently murder's legal in the state of California now. So yeah, that was it wasn't for everybody, but he's one of those comedians that other comedians always loved. So and the little bit that I knew him, he always made me laugh, and he was very funny. So sad to read that. Storage Yard, nope, that's not the one. Storage Yard says, I'm not on Twitter, but he follows Tamara on TikTok. Storage Yard resident, you're on TikTok, and Scott and I aren't on TikTok.
I know, right?
All right, there's Scott. I don't know. We're gonna have to have an emergency session about this because if Storage Yard is on there and we could keep in touch with them, that might be the way to do it. In any case, thank you. To everybody in the live chat, we always appreciate it. Thank you to Tamara and Scott for their flexible schedules. We will let you know, but we hope that we'll be back on Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. But whenever we're back, to keep in touch with us until then, Tamara, where do people find you? Like Storage Yard resident, where they find you?
Thank you for following me, Storage Yard. This is my handle on social medias.
Hey, Tamara and Scott, when work slows down for you, I like to think that you're going to really be able to devote time to your first love, which is, of course, trolling Mitch McConnell.
That's true. I know. I need to get back to that. Although I put a couple more, tweets there. I did right back to Kellyanne Conway at one point last weekend. So I'm getting back into it.
Good. I'm glad you're back at it.
I did. I threw an orange clown in there too. So I'm slowly but surely getting back into it a little bit.
And Scott is on there at SMN80. I'm at Christian DMZ. And the show is at Biden Time TV if you are on Twitter. And I will endeavor to post every week when the show is going to be on, because it does vary from week to week. But you can always subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, and then you'll get the notification when it goes live, or just be able to find it after the fact. BLADTCAST. Go ahead and find it over there. That is all the time we have for now, but we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.